20 million more engagements than the number 2 team, the champion Kansas City Chiefs.
And that's such an advantage that you have when you have all this content coming out.
These are 3 buckets that I don't think enough pro sports teams play in enough.
So you have to focus on engagement, and that can lead to followers in the end, but engagement's so much more important.
Welcome on inside yet another edition, a special edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. This episode, we are breaking down the 2023 NFL season, and I'm joined in studio by Jason Samuelson. He's our Associate Director of Analytics here at STN. And Jason, I take no credit, but you and your team did an amazing job here where you broke down the entire NFL season, team by team, platform by platform, engagement, following, just a deep dive in what's working right now in the NFL.
Yes, the team did an incredible job. We love looking at the data. Obviously, we are experts in our creative, but also we have to know what's happening in terms of engagement on these platforms to really understand what works best. So this report goes through all of it.
So we made this available to our entire community, and we'll make these download links available for you as well. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, already over half the NFL has downloaded it. We've had hundreds and hundreds of downloads on this inside our industry. So I know it's going to provide a lot of value, Jason, not just for people that work at NFL teams, but any professional, really anybody that works in sports. You're going to be able to take away some tidbits and advice and insights from this report. So again, this entire deck is going to be available. We're going to walk you through here on YouTube, and we'll try our best if you're listening only on audio to explain what we're breaking down. So we're going to start off with engagement. What teams were most engaging during the NFL season? We're going to do a quick look at who, in terms of, that vanity metric we talk about, in terms of followers, who leads the league in that area. And then we're going to break down Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter, who crushed these platforms in 2023, and what were the most successful posts in terms of type, buckets, lo-fi, hi-fi, what is working on those platforms right now, so you can take these intricacies back to your departments, back to your brands, and leverage it for your success on social media. So if you're ready, Jason, let's dig right into engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So the big thing here for us is focusing on engagement. The slide you're currently looking at, we are going over to each NFL team. We are showing the quantity of posts, their total engagements, and then their engagements per post. And it's sorted by total engagement.
Yeah, this is sorted by total engagement. So we wanted to just a few call outs here that were really interesting. The Eagles, 20 million more engagements than the number 2 team, the champion Kansas City Chiefs. We did, and you'll see this as a theme throughout this this podcast and presentation. The Eagles crushed it this year across social.
They did entirely. At the start of the year is where they had the most success too, David. They really focused on their content beginning of the year, and their fans loved the content.
Right.
Towards the second half of the year, the San Francisco 49ers started to pick up, and obviously going into their deep playoff run, they saw a lot of success also.
Well, one thing we wanted to just really kill this notion right away here at the top is so often people say, yeah, but the Cowboys are a global franchise and they're America's team, or yeah, but the Eagles and the Chiefs had good records on the field and we didn't. Check out the Seattle Seahawks, ninth in terms of total engagements. They missed the playoffs, where the Buccaneers had a decent on-field performance. They made the playoffs, 26 in total engagement. So that's an example of it's not exactly what happens on the field. You can really make some major changes off the field as well. And look at the Raiders. I know they were 12th in terms of total engagement on this list, but 6th in the league, to my calculation, in terms of engagements per post, which with all of our clients, Jason, you can speak to this more. We don't necessarily look at total engagements because that has a lot to do with your total following and audience, but engagements per post is a great metric to make sure it's an even playing field across the league.
Yes, we talk often about batting average in social media. The idea that
that's the one thing you can control, right?
You want every single post to be engaging, especially as you're trying to grow an audience. Yes, you can get 1 billion engagements if you post, 500 million times, but instead we want to focus on how can each post get the most engagements possible and continue to reach a bigger and bigger audience. And these platforms really focus on that metric.
And again, it's not just about volume either. The Ravens led the league in total post, but on this list, they're number 7. So I think what we want to try to show you is if you can really be the data science behind this, what type of content's working, A/B testing, and analyzing this on a weekly, monthly basis can really help you with that batting average long term. So we're excited to dig in more to the platforms. Let's quickly go over audience. So this will just show you in terms of league leaders who has the most followers. No surprise here, the Dallas Cowboys, America's team with 20 million plus followers now across platforms. The Patriots, obviously, you can make a huge argument, the biggest dynasty in the history of NFL at number 2.
Yes, audience is, we often say, is a vanity metric.
Yes.
Audience is followers across all of your platforms here. As you can see, this slide compared to the slide before it,
Different.
you'll notice there's a ton of differences.
Yeah.
Yes, the Dallas Cowboys, despite having the biggest following, still dropped down to 5 or 6 on total engagement, and the Patriots, who have a massive following, are in the
17th.
bottom half. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's a lot of CMOs out there that say we have to focus on getting our following up. And this is really a lagging indicator for us in terms of success. You have to focus on engagement, and that can lead to followers in the end. But engagement's so much more important.
Couple call outs here. Cleveland Browns 23rd in total following, but they were 11th in total engagements. Bengals, now I know you want to talk about this for a second. Number 20 in total followers and audience, but 6 in total engagements. And based on your analysis, that was the Joe Burrow effect.
Joe Burrow effect entirely, yes. And it's crazy, despite his injury, that the Bengals were still able to find really strong engagement, especially with Joe Burrow. So there's a ton of opportunity that goes outside of what's happening on the field to take advantage of these star players, still create unique content for them. And the Bengals did a great job.
And this is what we really geek out over. It's like, wow, the Browns, not great on the field, 23rd in following, but 11th in overall total engagements, not even engagements per post. That's impressive. Good for the Browns. But how did they do that? How are they able to leverage the platforms and their audience the right way? So when we go on to the next slide, the top social moments from the season, these are just really across the entire league, across platform, some themes you saw, Jason, that really worked well across all NFL teams.
And it's crazy to look at all three of these, David, and notice that none of them are focused on on-field performance.
Yeah.
Again, people always want to think you have to be getting touchdowns if you want to get engagement, and that's not the case here, where the Arizona Cardinals focusing on alopecia awareness, the Eagles focusing on old tradition, releasing an eagle on game day, and then the Kelsey family, who's obviously heavily talked about.
Let's watch this, because I know the two on the side there, Katie, are photos, but the Eagle release, which we can talk over this video too if you want to go ahead and play it, very simple, very lo-fi. It looks like an iPhone is capturing the actual cage opening, maybe broadcast angle or on-field camera getting the second angle here. But again, I think this was the highest engaging post for the Eagles, or right up there this season. That has nothing to do with the Jalen Hurts touchdown.
I have a marketing professor that's definitely looking at this and going, there's no way this got, 1 million likes, let alone, even higher view counts. And so it's such a good example of what social media has turned into and what it can be if you're able to be nimble and quick, but also looking at the data and understanding what people want. 3
things come to mind immediately for me, just being in the science of social. This can relate to a diehard Eagles fan, a casual Eagles fan, but also it factors into the feels. It's animals, obviously, or something people really like.
Can relate to Eagles fans, people that just like Eagles the animal.
Exactly, right. So it's such a broad ability, rather if you're doing a breakdown of, the corner and how they're, approaching a prevent defense, it's just not going to get as many legs as something macro like this will with your audience.
Yes, we want to cast a wide net, especially on a platform like TikTok, where this did really well, but even Instagram, Facebook, it can be found by so many people. And there's, in the end, you might not even know this is on a football field looking at the video, which is really a good thing for the content here to have even greater legs.
All right, so if you're following along on YouTube, we're going to head into Instagram now. And again, you'll see some of these logos change. And I want to shout out the Bengals and the Seahawks, who both are at 7 and 8 on this list, and high in terms of total engagement as well. But again, you see, and I think the theme you're going to see here is you can control your success with these engagements per post across these platforms, with even your total engagements that we've seen, especially Bengals and Seahawks really doing well on Instagram.
Yeah, shout out to the Seahawks. We talked about the Bengals already, obviously, but the Seahawks doing really well with their graphics, really strong photography, getting back to the roots of Instagram in a lot of ways, and using carousels effectively. We were able to have multiple pieces of content, like a strong piece of photography mixed with a highlight from the game.
Let's look into Instagram in terms of what the top performing content was on Instagram and the trends that we're seeing, similar to the overall trends, obviously, but fashion is something we've seen across all professional sports do really well. How can you pull back the curtain and give a behind-the-scenes access look into your athletes? That was a bucket that performed really well. Obviously, pop culture. I think the NFL did a good job of this. The Eagles, the Chiefs. How can we just leverage this Taylor Swift moment? And obviously, the New Heights podcast and more eyeballs on Travis and Jason Kelsey as well. And then influential celebrities. Anytime you have somebody going to your game, and this goes from a LA, which maybe they have more celebrities, to a Green Bay, who may have Anthony Davis or Lil Wayne come out. These are three buckets that I don't think enough pro sports teams play in enough, but we see across the board always perform.
And David, you say it all the time, but when you can look at these three different buckets here, you quickly notice none of them are that timely in the respect that you can see this week 1, you can see it week 18, and it still performs well in someone's vision. So just an idea here that really content can live in so many different ways, and it doesn't have to be from that exact day like someone has with an Instagram story. You can focus on these longer term storylines and really do well.
Well, one thing really getting granular here is that we do with our clients is we're tagging these individual buckets. So if it is a fashion related post, we tag it with fashion. If it's pop culture, celebrities. And then you can do an analysis like, let me look back at our last 12 fashion related posts. Oh my goodness, it's 5x the normal engagement of all the other posts. Let's double down on fashion. This is no different than the old school radio terminology of let's play the hits. Every 13 minutes, we're kind of recycling the same 9 songs that everybody wants to hear because you never know when someone's going to hop in their car and turn on the station.
It's a lot of work, but at the end, STN, we love doing this because we know the value in it. And it's so important, especially when you start to see a certain bucket of content start to gain a lot of traction because your fans are clearly craving that, and you're probably getting new fans in who also like what you're doing, and these platforms are so momentum based that you'll really be doing them a disservice if you were just to stop doing a high performing execution.
And what you'll see as we get into TikTok and some of the other platforms, like these buckets shift a little bit, right, based on the demo of the platform or just what that algorithm is pushing. This case study I thought was really interesting to quickly go over, and you can play this video as well, Katie, here on YouTube while we go through it. But you found this clip, which, over 1 million likes, did really well for the Eagles, really helped them be number 1 in total engagement with ideas like this. I mean, they're going out into the parking lot, the tailgate, and they're highlighting storytelling with fans. And I don't think enough teams.
So there's sideline passes if you want to come.
No, certainly not. And you can understand why maybe at first glance, because this is during the game. This is your core product, but you have to dedicate a singular person to go out and record and try to hand out these tickets. And Marie and Terrence, who are the stars of this video, were just incredible people that really everyone fell in love with.
Had a personality, right?
Yeah, and the Eagles are doubling down here actually and made a secondary post after this, brought them into the front office. They got to meet a bunch of people. And what an authentic piece of content that it's so hard to plan for. So you have to have additional resources that are just looking out for these little thread of opportunities.
You can tell the Eagles try things a lot, and if they do work, they double down, they parlay that into more success. All right, so let's get into TikTok. A couple of highlights here. Bills, Titans, and Lions, low posts, but they have the high engagement per post. Vikings, this is their best platform. They go into the top 15, and I know Gen Z is something that they're really focused on. I want to point out the Chargers here, though. 22nd on Instagram, but 5th here on this TikTok list as we look at it here on the screen. What's really important here, I think it was Kevin Dennison, the president of the LA Rams, spoke at Sports Business Journal a couple weeks ago. And what's really interesting, he said, listen, we have people that wear a Browns jersey or a Vikings jersey or a Raiders jersey, and their small kids are wearing the Chargers or the Rams jerseys, right? And it goes to show the Chargers have a macro goal of making sure they really speak to the Gen Z fan, because that's the fan that will be the future season ticket holders that will make their kids Charger fans. Because the Chargers weren't based in LA, they're not going to have the 45, 55-year-old, but they have a chance to capture the 8, the 15, the 20-year-old.
Well, and you can clearly see that strategy is built out from intentional decisions they're making and using data, I'm sure, to help start decide what's our audience like, where should we be targeting, and leaning towards TikTok more makes sense for them as it's a younger audience.
And also too, this may be upper funnel interest and awareness from a social perspective and marketing, but that's going to help lower funnel ticket sales in the future in the region. Let's go to top content trends. So again, we see fashion here. This is just simply a video post where it's behind the scenes. You wanted to talk a little bit about this middle section, which we can play this middle one, Katie, which is the player prompts. And this is so great too, because regardless of what your success is on the field, regardless if it's off season or in season, this stuff we're seeing works really well on TikTok.
A ton of teams are doing this, and this really started out with people walking up to the piece of paper and it says, "Hey, ice cream or cake," and they answer really quick and they say something funny. But the Bills here take it a step further, and in a really interesting way, handing players a drill and just seeing if they're valid. Giving a chance to give it a little go. And it's something that when you first see, you might not understand. And that's actually kind of the recipe for a great TikTok.
it's a thumb stopper for sure. And I think what's interesting about this, especially in football, these guys are muscular, they're linebackers, they have helmets. It's hard to really relate to them, but a helmet off content in a fun way like this really makes you invested in the players, their personality, and kind of makes you fall in love with the behind the scenes content here, which is great. The third bullet we wanted to point out is athletes with family. Again, I think what we've noticed in here is when you talk about macro engagements and really touching, like you said, casting a wider net, anytime you can play in these buckets that A, it makes sense today or it makes sense 6 months from now, but B, my mom, even though she's not an Eagles fan at all or a huge NFL fan, would enjoy this type of post.
100%. My mom has definitely seen this post on Facebook Reels and sent it to me, 2 years later as Facebook Reels goes. But this content is so great, and it plays into a world where it doesn't have to be timely. It's reutilizing macro content, right? This is a long form piece by the NFL Films with their mic'd up series. And then you're taking that, you're cutting it, you're turning into this shorter piece of content.
Nice captions, easy to digest.
Exactly. And that's such an advantage that you have when you have all this content coming out. You just have to find the ways to activate on it.
Well, if this was the Oscars and we had to give away the best film of the year, I think for social anyway, you got to give the case study next from the Tennessee Titans. I mean, this was talked about throughout our entire industry because it was lo-fi, it was trendy, and it didn't break the bank in terms of production value, which a lot of teams do break the bank. And not to say that you may not have the higher fi content on YouTube and Facebook, but this was just like perfect for what it was and also what it actually got from it in terms of engagement.
The Titans did such a good job here because they invested their time into multiple different pieces of content around schedule release, which is obviously a huge part of the NFL season. And during a time where there's a lot of fans who are dying to see content. So they create this version here where they're going on the streets of Nashville and asking, fans that don't know a lot about football, frankly, or I hope they don't at least, given their answers. But they're renaming these logos, and it's just so authentic and funny and interesting. And to be on TikTok, it vastly outperforms their higher fidelity version of this, right? So creating content like this and that other version, you have so many different things that can perform well for you on different platforms.
And this worked cross-platform for the Titans. But again, what we're seeing, and 5 years ago, you can have a really dope schedule release and just plaster it across all the platforms. Now, what we're recommending is individually. TikTok is definitely going to be more content like that, where maybe your YouTube channel has more of a hi-fi, what the Cowboys do usually, the music video with Post Malone. So you'd almost have to have a separate idea. And also, because schedule release is such a big moment, and what's funny about this in our industry, right, is like it's the only time that all the teams are on an equal playing field. So they definitely like to, go up against each other, and they're very competitive in that way. But definitely you need different ideas and saying the same thing in a different way based on what platform it's going on.
Yeah, and that's where I would urge teams to actually divide their team into smaller teams and say, you're focused on one idea, you're focused on another, and see where it all comes out. Because during this time, there's a lot of advantages to being able to create multiple pieces of content all around one simple idea like that.
Let's jump into Facebook. We won't spend too much time on Facebook, but what I will say, Steelers is the new logo we see here. Number 1 in the league in terms of Facebook engagers. Older demo. I think there's a lot of nostalgia with the Steelers fans. Pittsburgh Packers are high on this platform as well compared to the others. They're number 6. But you also mentioned, and we can. Actually, I'll stop there and see if you have any thoughts on Facebook.
Yeah, the Steelers were so interesting. I had to look into it, frankly, and they had a ton of great pop culture tie-ins with who was it again? Sorry, Michael Keaton, Snoop Dogg, comedians like Matt Reef, all doing really well and were in their top 10 performing posts. But they also use photos, which is something that maybe Facebook, you might assume that the long form video, things we've been talking about a ton, but we've started to see that there's a lot of good trends that the Steelers were jumping on.
Let's look at top performing content around the league on Facebook specifically and what buckets are working. The post-game content, this stadium top video is very similar to releasing the Eagle. And then, with the Packers, static graphics, although this graphic doesn't work on TikTok, right? But on Facebook, we're still seeing these moments that you can highlight, like playoffs clinched, or our next case study is actually about draft picks and being able to educate the audience on who the draft pick is.
We saw a great correlation between the amount of impressions that go into a piece of content on Facebook and the amount of shares that happen, right? That share rate. That was something that was really strong on Facebook. So making content that people are willing and able to share, easily shareable. This one is so easy to understand. Hey, playoffs clinched. you know there's so many people on Facebook that go, hey, I'm sharing this, I'm sending it to my friend.
And if it was a 15-second video that showed the top highlights of the season, at the end it said playoffs clinch, it's not as shareable, right? Because it's not so much in your face. So especially a Facebook platform, a Packer fan is going to want to brag to their friends like, you damn right we just clinched the playoffs.
You have to have something that is instantly recognizable and it's simple to understand. And that's a great example with the Packers.
And going down to the next slide, this is what I meant here. The draft day coverage, you notice that on Facebook specifically, the education and the content like, oh, by the way, this is who we just drafted. Here's who this person is. Get excited. Tend to work more from a static perspective more than other platforms.
Yes, and Facebook's so interesting too as you start to play into college football fans and this whole bigger space, but creating templated graphics, being prepared for draft day and being able to put all that content out. The Steelers did a great job, as well as the Packers, who really honed in on their live coverage and were able to activate on it appropriately.
All right, finally, let's go to, I refuse to call it X. I'm calling it Twitter. This is really, all that be, say what you want to say about Twitter and Elon Musk. There's no other platform that can hold a candle to the real-time sports, water cooler talk that you can have on Twitter. So that's why it's so huge in professional sports. Eagles, Chiefs do well. Ravens, this is their top platform, number 3 on Twitter. So they do really well in the live game window. What I found very interesting here is we look at this slide. Giants only had 920 tweets for the entire year. And the Titans, we just gave them all their flowers for their schedule release with their product on the field and also how engaging they can be off the field. They should not be last on this list, but it goes to show, I think, like a lot of brands, people are deciding like, you know what, we're going to put more resources into TikTok. We're going to put more resources into Instagram. And Twitter is one of those brand safety. Maybe we don't spend as much time on it anymore, which we've seen with our clients.
Yes, totally. And that's really intelligent from each of these teams to make a conscious decision. Where are we going to invest our time? You have to keep the lights on everywhere naturally, but being able to actually invest your time into specific platforms is really important. And even more importantly, finding experts who can talk on each of those platforms and really understand them better than anybody else.
And sometimes, these teams, we know there's only 3 people that are working 7 days a week, and you can't be 100%, 100 out of 100 across all platforms, getting super deep with your audience, answering community management questions. So you have to make a decision like, you know what, we're going to go all in on Instagram and TikTok, and Twitter and Facebook are going to lag a little bit, but we're okay with that investment. You can't be everywhere. You can't be everything to everybody, right?
The challenge is then you have one day you have the owner of the team say,
why are we 32 on Twitter?
What's going on here? Why aren't we right there on Twitter? Why didn't we post this? Why didn't we whatever? And so you have to be able to invest as much as you can and maybe increase your post quantity just a little bit on this platform.
Let's finally look at the top content trends on Twitter. So this is very interesting, right? We haven't seen memes just yet as we broke this down, but this is so huge on Twitter because the faster and more witty you can be, especially after a game, after a big play, this is where people can really, we've seen engagement skyrocket just by hitting a few of these notes during a game.
Every other platform is having the length of time at which you can see the content in the algorithm become longer and longer. Twitter is still 24 hours. If it means longer than a day old, you really won't see it on the platform unless someone retweets it, whatever, and shares it later. But yes, being timely here is so important. And all the examples in front of us here are looking at very timely, humorous, event-based pop culture types of
shout out to the Eagles again. Continuing to impress here with the Taylor Swift friendship bracelet mentioned there. So again, if you know content, the inside joke, oh, I get it, that's hilarious, let me retweet that, let me like it. That works across social, but especially Twitter at the right time in a real-time moment. It could just crush your engagement goals.
And the content really can start to roll downhill. The example with the Chargers on the far left using an I think you should leave type meme style here. And I think you should leave fans thought that was incredible. And Tim Robinson being a football fan himself. So how can you really talk to these different audiences and find ways into these niches with your content?
I want to get into the case study real quick for Twitter. And what we called out here was probably one of the biggest moments on Twitter during the NFL season was the reaction of this Charger fan during one of the nationally televised games. But you could tell on Twitter, people were just like having so much fun with this woman and her reactions. And the Chargers listened, and the Chargers played into that and parlayed that for more success. So listening to your fans and listening to what football fans are talking about during a game, you're really able to get in with the fun on them.
And to your point, again, the Chargers deciding, hey, we're going to make our tone of voice, our humor, really toned towards younger audiences.
Yes.
And they do a ton of that here where they're leaning into humor. They're not afraid to make fun of themselves when they lose a game. And they're really just focused on, hey, what's the best way to get engagement? And it's working out for them.
All right. So finally, just to wrap this up, Jason, I wanted to leave you with a couple takeaways here. And I think throughout this presentation or through this podcast, we kind of broke down what's working and some insights and some things you can take back to your teams. But to break this down in 3 simple terms, we know lo-fi content in these simple videos are working, right? Lo-fi content, the stats right now are saying 40% more views, 30% more engagement. We saw what the Eagles did with following their fans, really finding ideas that can, maybe we should film the eagle being released from this cage. And knowing that that's working across the NFL, I think any NFL employee, any professional sports employee can say, what are some moments that are just kind of happening around our arena or around our game that we can get on an iPhone, throw it in CapCut and get this thing up because it's working?
Yeah, people that work in sports are kind of numb to working in sports. And there's a lot of people that just want to see a little bit behind the curtain. And you'd be surprised what those pieces of content can be.
On The Last Dance, one of the most famous scenes is Jordan before the game playing the quarter game with the security guard. I mean, if you had a moment like that, like we saw in a, 6-piece documentary, that was one of the biggest scenes that came out of that. People just love that behind the scenes content. Star personalities, no surprise here, but I really do love what the NFL, the Chiefs, the Eagles did. Travis and Jason at an all-time high in terms of their likability, the Taylor Swift moments, but really understanding what pop culture, what's happening. Oh, the eclipse is happening. How can we dive down on that? Oh, the Oscars are happening. Can we ask our players after practice if they were a famous actor, who would they be and why? We see a lot of that success if you can tie your team's personality to these different pop culture dates and moments.
Yes, totally. And then finally, we see the memes on Twitter. The humor is just been so incredibly important. Facebook as well. If you really want strong engagement, you have to find ways to engage users in a way that's a little bit different. And you can't control on-field performance, but what you can control is witty copy, good imagery, all those things.
And hopefully what you take away from this episode is even if my team doesn't make the playoffs or we only win 4 games this year, I still have a fighting chance for those engagements per post and those total engagements if I can make sure I'm playing in the right buckets, A/B testing, trying new things, parlaying that success as I see those new things work. And that's what me and Jason geek out over every day. We live in these platforms. We eat, live, and breathe it. So we were so excited to kind of break down the NFL at large. But if anybody ever needs additional help, if you're a team, if you're a brand, you would love to dive in specifically for what's working, what's not working with your team, and how to leverage the white space. This is what we do every day, so we love doing it. So if you listen to the podcast, we appreciate it. Make sure to check out the YouTube version. You can see all the slides from our report, from our analysis, also all the videos and photos we were talking about as we, talk this over to our voiceover. But we appreciate it. Jason, any final thoughts for people working in sports?
I think the most important thing here is just to continue to audit what you're doing and continue to change. These platforms, unlike other forms of marketing, they're constantly changing. So you have to constantly audit it. And hopefully this documentation provides a little bit of inspiration for what to do.
It's like failing isn't the worst thing. It's succeeding and not knowing why. So always analyze, A/B test, find out what's working, double down on those successes. If you ever need help, we're always here. Jason Samuelson, the Associate Director of Analytics here at STN, David Brickley, your host of the Business Social Podcast, and this, little mini webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. This has been yet another edition of the Biz of Social Podcast. I'm David Brickley. It's all been powered by STN Digital.